after our live. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi everyone. Today is a special guest with us, and Professor King from Harvard University. I am saying always, many people actually are saying father of data of the Professor King. Thank you so much for joining us. We know that you are very busy, especially these days, research and the company, students, with the students, etc. I appreciate that for today's time, Professor King.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome again. I want to just quickly start our interview. First of all, today, with the rapid digitalization that we're going through because of this pandemic situation, everyone is talking about the importance of big data, AI, etc. But can you give us some certain examples that data analytics can do in such a situation that we are going through right now?
Sure. First of all, let me wish everyone watching well. I hope you're all safe and sound and hunkered away in some nice, safe place, and your family and relatives are okay as well. And I also hope that the next episode of the science fiction movie that we seem to be stuck in is better than this one. I'll give you a few examples if you like. So the government of Italy called me early on, and very early on in the crisis, and said, we need the public to take public health advice. Can you design some experiments to help them figure out how to help the government figure out how to communicate in effective ways? It seems easy to communicate. We all think it's easy to communicate, but we seem to manage to get into misunderstandings with people that we know and love for decades. So it's very difficult to communicate with people that you don't know. And so we designed some experiments and figured out how they could communicate. So that was one thing that we were able to do very well with the incredible collaboration that's going on these days. Really terrific collaboration. In addition, there's a need for detecting where the virus is, and testing is not up to par. What we would really like is for everybody who goes into every single coffee shop to be tested on the way in, and then we would know it was safe at all times, and everything would be fine. But we're not there yet. Eventually we'll be there, but not quite yet. So how do we do it? Well, there's an app that you can all download. It's called How We Feel. How We Feel. So you download the app on your iPhone or Android, and you just answer a few questions about your symptoms. And a few other bits of information, and we take that information, and with that we can estimate the prevalence of the disease in the population. Even though you can't necessarily figure out just from the symptoms whether somebody has the disease, it turns out possible with modern statistical methods to figure out the proportion of people that have the disease. And so that's another kind of approach that we're using to try to make things go forward. I can also mention yet another thing. So right now, everybody is okay with researchers having their data and governments having their data, because we would very much like an end to this pandemic, right? And everybody knows that the data is really essential to this, right? So that's important, but what I'm really interested in is making sure that when the pandemic is over, we're still able to collect data this well, because we have incredible collaboration from governments and academics and the public right now. Everyone is working together like never before. But when the pandemic ends, it will still be the case that most people, even now, die from other causes rather than COVID, and later on that will still be the case. We need to be able to collect that data continuously, even after the disease goes away, even after we have a vaccine which prevents the disease. At that point, if we can get something from this crisis, the ability to collect data like that in privacy protecting ways that really make it clear that nobody's privacy could possibly be violated, then actually we will have gotten something good out of the crisis. We're actually working with Microsoft and others to put in place those privacy protections now so that later on we'll still all be comfortable sharing our data.
Okay. Speaking of collaboration and privacy, do you think in that ongoing process, the perception of the general public has changed about the idea of big data and data collection, etc.? Because before, we know that people were sort of suspicious about it. They were concerned about the privacy or who is getting the data and how it's used, how it's analyzed, etc. Do you think those changed in the meantime right now?
Also, Professor King, I can add maybe some things for Aysu's questions. Actually, and you said that collaboration is very important. But maybe these days, actually, we need to more share data each other. Can we do that or not? For example, private sector will share with their data with the government. Government will share their data with the private sector, academicians, etc. Not only United States, the other countries also. Also, I want to add this.
Yeah, I think that's very important. So it's really important that the public understand two things. So one is we typically think of a balance between individual privacy and the public good that could come from taking the data and finding insights about public health. I mean, if we found a solution to this problem by collecting data, I think most people would be perfectly happy to give away some of their personal privacy in order to do that. But that balance is always there, right? So you have to worry about the balance. If we only worry about creating public good, then that's not going to work because we do have to protect people's privacy. If we only worry about privacy, that's no good at all because even if if our individual privacy is protected, but then it's not possible to use that for the public good, that's no good either. So anytime one of us pushes one side, it's very important that we all understand there's another side. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, turns out there are some technological innovations happening. I mentioned a minute ago, we're working on some of them with Microsoft. There are some technological innovations to take this balancing between privacy and public good and make it so that it's not necessary to have a balancing act, so that you can get both, right? So it turns out there's technology. If you think about what's our goal, right? If we collect a big set of data about details about everybody, when we're trying to look for patterns, we're trying to look for where the outbreaks are of COVID, or what kinds of communication messages are put out to have an effect, or what's the prevalence of the disease in the population. These are not questions that involve anybody. They're only questions that involve everybody. So the interesting thing is, it turns out to be possible with some new technology to make it mathematically impossible to re-identify or violate anyone's individual privacy at the same time as it is possible to learn about the general patterns in the population. And if we're able to implement those methods called differential privacy and some others, if we're able to implement those, then it's going to be possible to get rid of the balancing and assure everybody of their individual privacy at the same time as we are able to create public good that benefits everybody. So that's the goal.
There are some questions from the audience, Professor King. For example, it's one question. Data scientist is one of the most critical jobs for the future of workforce. What skills do students need or improve if they want to be a data scientist?
So the great thing about data science is it's not just one discipline. It's actually a core, but there are applications in lots and lots of different areas. So you could think maybe the core might be something like statistics, but most of the innovations in the field of statistics actually didn't happen in the field of statistics. They actually happened in the application areas. They happened when you needed a solution to a particular problem, to a particular application, to a particular issue that was going on in business. Once you saw that, you would either use whatever the available statistical method was, or you would be forced to innovate. So that's where the innovations happen. So if you're interested in data science, you could go to statistics, but you could also go to the methodological subfield of a vast array of disciplines. In economics, the subfield is called econometrics. In political science, the subfield is called political methodology. In sociology, it's sociological methodology. In psychology, it's psychometrics and psychological statistics. Actually, there may be 100 of these different fields. In baseball, in sports, they call it sabermetrics. There's chemometrics. There's lots and lots of these. You can study data science in any one of these, and you'll be okay. And you'll learn about data science. What's happening is that data science is becoming the union of all of these different application areas. Statistics is still important because if you come up with some new method, then the statisticians will take that method and make it mathematically more sound and statistically more sound and generalize it and prove the properties of it and then send it back out to the field. So if you have a mathematical bent, you can do that. If you have an application bent, you can pick the application area that you're interested in. If you're interested in politics, I highly recommend the field that I grew up in, which is political methodology. But if you're interested in insurance, there's actuarial science. There's lots of these areas. And when you get involved in one of these, that's not the end. You actually get to be involved in all of them to some degree. And understanding the other ones are really, really helpful because when you see a different type of problem in your field, if you had experience in a completely different field, you may have just found the solution. Like it was an interesting thing, but now actually it turns out to be a solution to your problem.
So how about the employment side of this issue? Right now, one of the top concerns of the governments, of course, is employment in many different sectors, of course. But for the future, with this ongoing change, of course, it will not going to fade after the pandemic. So what kind of new occupations or new positions in the job market will be rising for the future? What would you say?
So for years, when people would ask me this question, I would always say there hasn't been unemployment in the area of data science for 30 or 40 years. Basically, there's always more people that more data scientists that companies want to hire than there are people. At the moment, with everyone out of a job because of the pandemic, I don't know what the actual story is. But I think actually it's very likely in the future that we're still going to need many things. You can focus on different substantive areas. You can focus on different methodological areas. If you're
Yeah. Can you hear us, Professor King? Yeah. We cannot hear you. Maybe your headphones. Can you hear us? We cannot hear you. Just a second. Maybe microphone is not.
How is that? Is that working?
Okay. Now it's okay. Now it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. My apologies.
Yeah, please
Okay.
go.
Where did you lose me?
Actually, we were talking about beginning in mid-April, and around 1.5 billion students actually affected as schools or university closed in around 190 countries. And
Wow.
how to evaluate countries and students' adaptation in online education?
Mhm. Well, that's very interesting because the direction of universities has been moving to the online world very slowly over many years. And this pandemic has basically caused the entire world to practice using this technology. So we've all become experts in it. We all know how to use it now. We don't necessarily, however, know how to use it well. And we really need to work on the pedagogy of this problem. And teaching in an online environment is actually a different experience than teaching in person. It's very different experience, and we need to really learn how to do this. It's quite important to our students, of course. You can't give a 2-hour lecture online; it won't work. People won't be able to pay attention. On the other hand, the advantage of this world is that everyone is exactly the same distance from everyone else. That's an entirely different setup. As it happens, as we were talking earlier, I developed some technology some years ago. We've been working on it that works especially well for the online environment. Because what happens for instructors is we spend quite a lot of time translating our in-person class into an online class. It's an overwhelming task to really get it right. And while we're doing that, who's managing the out-of-classroom experience? It's just too much for us. So I developed this technology to deal with that. It also deals with one other thing. If the average instructor in the average classroom all across the world, at Harvard and everywhere else, if they say, do the reading, approximately 20 to 30% of the students do the reading, right? Now that doesn't involve anybody in the audience here who was in school. I know that you all did your work, but it did involve me when I was in school. You know? But as an instructor, it's really important to us that everyone does the reading, not only because we really want you to learn what we have to say, but when you come to class and we're interacting online or in person, if people have different preparation, then it's not going to be as good a class. So how do you get that 20 to 30% who do the reading up higher? So we developed a technology that with almost no effort on the part of the instructor will get 90% of the students to do the reading pretty much every time. And so the app is called Peruse All. So if you the word perusal means to read, right? Perusal. But if you add an extra L, it's peruseall.com, right?
Again.
Yeah, so perusall.com. And what this does is it's a social e-reader. So we are social creatures, human beings are. We see this in this pandemic. The idea that we would all do social distancing is a little crazy because like it drives us crazy. Like a severe punishment to somebody is solitary confinement, right? That's often in many countries considered cruel and unusual punishment. And yet that's what we have to all do now. Well, if you turn that around and you think of social motivations as a very powerful tool for teaching, then that's what Peruse All does. So you can sign on, and it's an e-reader, so you can read your book or your lessons or whatever it is. The platform, by the way, is for free. So you can sign on. You'll see the book or whatever it is. You can see, however, down the left-hand side, little faces of your friends. Right, so you see the social motivations. You're given an instruction to read chapters 2 and 3, and you can highlight little passages and say, I don't really understand this, right? And then somebody else can respond in threads, Facebook style, to the first annotation and say, oh, I think it's this. And someone else can say, no, that's not right. And you go back and forth, and the instructor could jump in and correct it at any time, but we tell the instructor just stay out of it, because it's much better when the students try to get there themselves. When someone's lecturing, the person in the room that's definitely learning something is the lecturer. Teaching teaches the teacher, right? And so what we try to do is we turn the students into teachers, right? We help them help each other. And we also know that if they started off with the wrong answer and in social interactions, they get to the right answer, they're much more likely to remember that forever. So it's a much better teaching tool to let that happen. That social interaction about a text can really help the students in the long run. And so that's sort of basically how we do it. And then we use some cool data analytics to grade the annotations and the other ways the students interact with each other. We encourage the professor to combine the perusal and to combine their usual class participation score with the perusal automatically created engagement score. Combine them together, and put them together. Now, it makes sense to put them together because the reason we have a class participation score is not because we want students to stand up and perform. It's because if you help others, you learn yourself, and other people learn when someone's teaching aside from the instructor. Right? But some people, women, minorities, certain cultures, don't like to stand up in front of everybody and perform. Instead, but that doesn't mean they don't like to help others. It turns out with perusal, they can help others in this other way. And then with this data, this cool data analytics that we've developed originally for my students, but we've made the platform available more generally, is that if you're not going to get 100% of your class participation score, we'll give you little nudges and make sure you're going to get 100%. We'll try to make sure you get there. So for example, if you skip pages 61 to 67, well, we know that, right? We know everything you're doing on the platform. But what we'll do is we'll send you a private, non-humiliating note that only you see, no one else sees, and it says, hey, you skipped pages 61 to 67. And that's okay, it's up to you, but just so you know, there's a really important concept on page 63 that your classmates are talking about right now. We think you might want to go back and have a look at that. And we know that they do because we run these experiments to make sure it happens. And so this is sort of data science used to get to help students learn. So there's more to it than that, but that gives you a feel for it.
Really perfect, really perfect. Professor King, how about government's adaptation to technology has also accelerated about the epidemic especially. And will the role of the digital transformation increase in public administration in the post-epidemic period? What do you think?
I'm sorry, that didn't completely come through.
Will the role of the digital transformation increase in public administration into the post-epidemic period? What do you think?
The public administration, you mean the public health?
No, in general.
In general, government.
Oh, so how will the pandemic affect government in general? You mean?
Sure. Government,
yes.
Government services and health services. E-government, smart, etc.
I think the point of politics, in a sense, is to take whatever's happened out there in the world and to use it to your favor. So we'll have to see what the battle is among the politicians on all the sides. Mm-hmm. What we can hope for is that this is a Sputnik moment, if you know what I mean. So Sputnik was a satellite that the Soviet Union shot up, and it was orbiting the planet. All it did is send out a little chirp, burp, burp, every once in a while. And the Americans got so shocked about this, that the Soviets were able to do this, that they put huge amounts of money into scientific research. And the Soviet Union then, in response, put huge amounts of money into scientific research. They also put money into bombs and guns. Okay, fine, but they put money into scientific research, and that has created enormous progress in the scientific world and therefore a lot of public good. Maybe this is the time where we have our generation's Sputnik moment. Maybe this is the time when everyone realizes if we had a little bit more science, if we could create a vaccine in a month rather than 2 or 3 or 4 years, that we would all be better off. And if we understood the process of doing that and the science behind it, maybe we would all be better off. Right. And maybe we will start to look into the future a little bit farther. The last really big pandemic was 100 years ago. There have been others. You know, HIV was 30, 40 years ago, right? And others that were closer. But if we could look farther into the future, it's possible that governments might reorient in a different way. That may be just optimistic, but you know, we'll see.
To be optimistic right now. How about the reaction of the general public, the society in general? What kind of a societal change are you expecting once we are out of their homes and trying to get normal again?
Yeah. Well, on optimism first. It's conceivable that this is the last pandemic humanity ever sees, right? If we get our act together and get the science together, right? If we get our act together, it's possible, right? Going from the point where we had no idea what caused disease to the point where we had a vaccine, we could create a vaccine in some number of years or decades. That's an enormous change. Getting from the point where you can do it in a few years to you can do it in a few months seems much easier. So maybe we'll get there. So what's going to happen to the public? I think our lives are going to be different. I think it's really important that we orient ourselves to that, right? It's really important that we understand that, yeah, the world's going to be different. And that's okay, because we're going to take the best parts of this and we're going to bring it forward. Like I quite like that all of a sudden I am now exactly the same distance from you as I am from the person in the next room, right? That pretty much everybody in the world is the same distance from each other. That has tremendous advantages. The meetings I go to now, you know, they don't take 10 minutes to get there, 10 minutes at the beginning, which is normally reserved for people arriving, and then 10 more minutes because one person is late, you know, and then schmoozing at the end. Actually, business is much more productive. Like people seem to be taking on new hobbies. So there's a lot bad that's happening now, absolutely, and we'll fix that. But I think we should all look really hard for the things we're learning from this. As I mentioned earlier, I think we're going to learn a lot from online education. I think a lot of universities will go out of business, and that's going to be horrible. And a lot of universities will grow very fast, and that'll be pretty good. So
thank you so much, Professor King. Really an amazing and useful and broadcast for us. Do you have any final comments? Because you have many students, you have many researchers, you have many employees also. And do you have any final comments to our audience about this period, about these days?
Well, it's a shocking period. It's something none of us have ever experienced before. Some of us have it really bad, have the disease ourselves, or have loved ones who have died, who are very sick. But we'll get through this. It'll be okay eventually. The society will move on. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to find ways of taking that forward, to find ways of looking for the best things, the things that we can continue. I've heard a lot of people say, you know what, I didn't really like commuting before, and it wasn't very productive. So I think we'll get some good things out of this. We just have to figure out what those are and not let them just slip away with us all insisting that we go back to every thing exactly the way it was. There's a lot of things like the way it was that I want to do too, but it shouldn't be exactly the way it was. We should get something out of this. We should move forward. So I utterly appreciate the opportunity to talk with you again and to see, at least virtually, your audience.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your valuable time, of course, and for this lively and fulfilling conversation. Thank you very much.
Thanks to both of you.
Be safe. Bye-bye.
You too. Thank you. Take care.